Welcome to the RCAF USA Roundup. I'm Shad Sullivan.
And I'm Jaden Moreland, and we're here to talk all things cattle, sheep, and American exceptionalism. We stand for liberty and freedom.
And we are having real and honest conversations about issues that affect your family, your ranch, your community, and most of all, your legacy. So let's jump right in.
It's no secret that wolves are a huge problem for American ranchers in many western states. But the heartbreaking attacks on livestock just serve as an example of something bigger. We sat down with Colorado rancher and journalist Rachel Gabel to break down the Ballot Box Biology of Colorado's wolf reintroduction and the door it opens to the attack on rural America and private property rights. You may not be from Colorado and you may not have wolf problems, but make no mistake, this issue applies to you and your ranch. This episode is sponsored by Ag West Feeds, providing the best quality mineral feed for your farm or ranch. Visit them in Burwell, Nebraska today. Thank you, Ag West, for being a 2023 convention sponsor, and thank you for your support of RCAF USA. Are you a rancher looking for a place to sell direct-to-consumer beef? Or are you a consumer looking to buy 100% American beef from a local rancher? Visit usabeef.org to get connected today.
Okay. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today. Why don't you start by just giving us a quick introduction? Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you do.
Sure thing. I'm Rachel Gabel. I'm the assistant editor of the Fence Post magazine. I also have a weekly column that appears in Colorado Politics and the Denver and Colorado Springs Gazette about agriculture and rural issues. And I do a little writing on the side, some books. Of course, Chad's little boy was on the back of my first one, so that was fun. He's not little anymore, dang it, but he was when he was on there. But I live up in northeastern Colorado. I'm on the family cattle operation. We run cows. My husband and I run cows with his folks. So we're on a cow-calf operation every day.
And Rachel Gabel is an American hero. Because she's not.
Good gosh, Shad.
Yes, you are. And because you're not afraid to go to bat for what's right. And, I was listening to one of your other podcasts, which I love the new podcast. Congratulations on that. And it was amazing because what did somebody said something about you were basically honest, right? Because there's no frills about it. It's just the way it is. That's how you're supposed to be when you're in publishing, and I love it. And that's what I love about you, because we need way more like you.
We do.
Thank you.
And well, we love honest, real conversations. That's why we're here. So I guess that kind of brings us into why we asked you on the podcast today. This is hot button issue. And so I guess a little background of December of 2023, Colorado Parks and Wildlife released wolves into Colorado. And I know you have kind of done a lot of research and kind of been in the forefront of reporting on this and letting everybody know what's going on. So kind of just give us the rundown on these wolves and what's been going on with this issue.
Sure. In 2020, there was a citizen-led initiative, a ballot proposal put together to reintroduce gray wolves into western Colorado, west of the Continental Divide, and it was a release onto state or federal lands, and it was enough wolves to make for a sustainable population. So they're thinking 30 to 50 wolves over the next 5 years. So fast forward to 2023 in December, the first wolves were released into Colorado. Now, they tried to source wolves from a number of places, Wyoming, Montana, several states. Wyoming basically told Colorado to go pound sand and said they had no intention of providing source wolves to the reintroduction efforts here in Colorado. So they ended up going with Oregon, which is another blue state, of course. And the wolves were released, the first 5 in December, and come to find out, the majority of those wolves came from packs with history of livestock depredation in Oregon. And I reported that, and that was picked up by mainstream media, and as well it should have been. That should be a mainstream story. And really agriculture should be in the mainstream because, it's so important to everybody's daily lives. But that story was pretty big. And in the meantime, while that was breaking, there were another 5 wolves that were released from Oregon as well. So the total of 10 wolves released, 9 of those came from packs with recent depredation history on livestock. And the 10th wolf did not, only because she wasn't listed as associated with a pack. So CPW's answer to that was, well, any wolf pack in close proximity to livestock will depredate on livestock, and all wolves in Oregon are in close proximity to livestock. The release itself, the first 5 wolves, was very, the optics were troubling of that first release. The governor, of course, was there. Press was essentially not allowed. CPW did allow Colorado Public Radio and the Colorado Sun, which are both pretty left-leaning, hard-leaning, real left publications. Those are the only 2 that CPW allowed to be there, and they had press pool coverage. Well, typically when we talk about press pool coverage, we talk about, like card-carrying members of the press doing photos, video, and like news coverage of an event. And what ended up coming out of that was like this slow motion video, and the press pool, the written coverage was just bizarre. It was like, and I am not even kidding about this, it was like the wolves' hair was blowing through the holes in the crate, and they galloped into the forest, majestically looking back over their shoulder, and a hushed awe fell over the crowd. Like, that is not press coverage. That is PR.
Yeah.
That's theater.
It was theater. It was absolutely theater. It was all like slow motion video, and the governor was there clasping his hands to his heart. And it was really frustrating because for all of those reasons that I mentioned. But the ranchers there was one that shared a fence with this particular state-owned property. And the reason they didn't do federal is because they would have had to do a NEPA study, which would have taken several years, the kind of study that ranchers have to do if they want to put a new tank in or a new fence, that kind of lengthy NEPA study. But CPW was able to circumvent that by using state lands, and they closed off the county road and brought in, the black Suburbans full of the governor and the first gentleman, and they really kind of chose winners and losers. There was, for example, Grand County is where this was, the first release, which was like 61% against the wolf release, by the way.
Right.
But Grand County Commissioner Merritt Linke was on one of the working groups and was not notified or invited to this. But there was a member of one of the other working groups. Her name is Darlene Kabobel, and she is the head honcho at the Wolf and Wildlife Center or something. That's the group that's hosting the wolf naming contest. And she was there. So they were definitely picking some winners and losers. And I really thought when we were talking about wolf release, that like CPW would do it pretty quietly, like 3 CPW guys with some wolves in the middle of nowhere, like release them and then let people know. But it was very theatrical, and it was a big group, and the odd hush fell over the crowd and all of that nonsense. So that really sat poorly with ranchers and voters and elected leadership in that area. So I'll stop and let you process everything I just said, because I just told you a lot.
Yeah,
it's a lot. It is.
So back up to the naming contest. Are they like, is this open to everyone? Are they?
No. So this is open to middle school kids. They have an educational script that they can send to teachers to teach them about wolves and how great this is for the state. And I emailed them and asked to review the educational script, and of course they wouldn't give it to me, but I have friends in low places, and I've got my dirty grubby mitts on one, and it was what you would expect. I mean, it was very pro wolf and balancing the ecosystem, and every buzzword you could ever imagine. And they did announce the results of said wolf naming contest the other day. But a lot of the mainstream media did not pick that up. And I had to cheer, I
Yeah.
will admit.
Yeah. I just don't, they're just turning it into such a, like, it's almost like literally a theatrical performance. That's ridiculous between the way they released it, the media coverage, and then even pulling in kids who, I mean, they shouldn't be doing that on a state issue. I mean, come on.
A little bit of indoctrination.
It's unnecessarily inflammatory.
Yes.
The whole
It
thing.
really is just a punch in the face to the opposition, to the ranchers, to the people who voted against it, which, it barely passed in Colorado. I think it was like 50.4% passing. I was surprised really to see that El Paso County was the lowest of the passing counties. I can't remember where they were at 51%, and then maybe Boulder County was the highest at 68%. But it surprised me in El Paso County because half of El Paso County is rural and maybe going away from that, but it wasn't like it was a enormous win. I mean, it was a win. Let's no doubt. But you touched on something that I was very interested in talking about, Rachel, and that was did you say legislation from the voter box? What was that phrase that you used about issues such as reintroduction or introduction?
Ballot box biology.
Ballot box biology. And so I want to talk more about that. I mean, how does that even come about? I mean, we had a committee of people that decided, hey, we want to put this on the ballot, and we have to go through these steps that make it legal, correct?
Well, they have to go in front of the title board with their
Right.
with their proposed initiative. And it's just like the pause initiative several years ago. You probably remember that.
Yep.
I remember that very well. Was an initiative that would have made it illegal to do any sort of
Anything.
slaughter. Oh, yeah, anything. It was a bad deal, but it would have outlawed slaughter until an animal reached like 20% of their,
Right.
I can't remember, a certain percentage of their natural life. And they decided that a natural lifespan on a beef animal is 20 years. I don't
Right.
have any 20-year-old cows, but so they wouldn't have been able to be slaughtered until they were like 5. And you're just thinking of like all of the reasons why this is such a bad idea, because there's a lot of them. But it also would have outlawed any sort of AI preg checking, pulling
Right.
calves, anything that you had to like go in for. So because it had the 2 questions on there, should we
Right.
make it illegal to do this and this? It was finally, I mean, the title board did go ahead and set a title to it, and then the major agriculture groups and livestock groups here in Colorado had to take it all the way to the state Supreme Court. And at that point, the state Supreme Court ruled that it was a 2-question
Correct.
deal. So initiatives here in Colorado, they don't have to make sense. They don't have to be true. They don't have to be a good idea. You could reintroduce unicorns into Crowley County. Like, it doesn't have to make sense, but it can only be one question. Do we want to reintroduce unicorns to Crowley County? And so that's the main thing. And then they have to get, once the title is set, then they can go ahead and gather signatures. So that's what happened with the wolf deal. So
Right.
it's supposed to be like a citizen-led initiative, but what it turns into is big money from out of state, from radical groups and environmental groups and extremist groups pull their money, and then they're like, we'll get Colorado to do it. And of course, it's not hard to find a radical environmentalist in Colorado to run this. It seems to be the same guys coming over and over and over
Right.
that we see. And there's lots of connections to be made there, but so they run it and they can get it on the ballot. And that's what happened with the wolf deal. That's what happened there's a ballot initiative right now in Denver, in the city and county of Denver, to outlaw slaughterhouses, which wouldn't seem like a very big deal, except for Superior Farms is in Denver. So that's the largest lamb processor in the country. So if they're able to do that, then that's really just
And
derails
so will
the
they go to
land.
the ballot with that, Rachel? Will they go to the ballot with that?
And it's up to Denver voters.
Oh, wow.
So that's not going to
And that
probably
may have
end
been
well.
one, yeah, and that may have been one of the things that, the wolf reintroduction, I call it introduction, but that may have been one of the issues with the Pause Act, that, that 2-question ballot initiative, they probably learned from that, and that was
Yeah.
in that hotbed of when, the first gentleman's friend was, set on the state vet board, and she's an animal rights activist, an extreme animal rights activist, and then she's prosecuted for abusing animals. I mean, you just can't make all this stuff up. And
Yeah,
so
it's like a bad novel.
it is, it is, and they learn along the way. And of course, the outside money is so influential. I know that a lot of that came from the Western Coast and the East Coast, and that's how they incrementally implement their ideology. But I'm sorry, Jaden, go ahead. I get off on these rabbit trails. You'll have to forgive me.
Oh, you're good.
I'm just as bad as Shad, so you just have to like mute us and bring us back in. It's
Oh,
fine.
you're good. We're just going where the conversation takes us. It's a good conversation to have. So
This is very much how me and Shad's conversations go normally.
Pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah,
Pretty much.
he's good at
We're all
that.
over. We're
Well,
all over and we're mad.
Very bad. Very bad.
I guess bringing it back then to the wolf issue of, I guess, are we seeing, like, have we already seen the effects of these specific wolves that were introduced? Like, did they head for the hills, or are they, kind of scouting it out? Have we seen anything yet?
Let me back up and tell you about the wolves that were already here, because I have to tell you that to answer your question.
Okay.
So wolves naturally migrated from Wyoming, and they decided that they really like Don Gittelson's place, which is right there in the North Park area by Walden. Poor Don Gittleson has been through more than any one man should be able to.
Oh,
If
no doubt.
Shad, did you listen to him on the ProAg podcast?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, it just kills me. And some of the messages that I get from these guys that are up there in the Walden area and in the release area around Grand County just rip my heart out and stomp on it. It's just awful. But getting back to the original question, so there's wolves naturally migrating, and there's been a lot of depredation incidences with these particular wolves. And Don, we have the 10J rule here in Colorado, which means that if there's problem wolves, then CPW or Wildlife Services can lethally remove them. But Don made a formal request to do so with 2 of the wolves that had been there for like 14 of the depredation incidences, like working dogs, domestic dogs, cattle, sheep, like you name it, 13, 14 incidences. And the wolves had been there for almost all of them, and the state refused to remove them, which it was the same week as the reintroduction release. So like, I get why they didn't do it, but it's still, like, if that's not chronically depredating, then I don't know what is.
Exactly.
So these new wolves have no depredation has been reported to this point.
Fingers crossed.
But I got a picture on my phone a couple weeks ago of this wolf sitting with a collar, like on a rock. I was like, where is this? Is this real? Are you sure? Who is this? And it was just a guy that was driving down one of the roads in Grand County, and a wolf ran in front of his pickup, and he stopped, and he's like, I have a Samsung cell phone, and I just got that thing out. And he took 2 or 3 pictures before he even got the window rolled down. And he said the wolf went up on top of this rock outcropping and sat there and watched him. It was incredible.
Oh, that's ridiculous. I guess then
that blows my mind in a million different directions. But they, according to CPW, they are still here, all of them, and no depredations have been reported. Now, CPW is not terribly accessible or transparent, and by that I mean they don't answer. Sometimes they have a stroke of genius and they will email me back, but for the most part they do not. And that really came out in the CPW commission meeting last week. There was lots of talk about that.
So the CPW is Colorado Parks and Wildlife. tell me about if we're they're doing their jobs, right? Where I'm not gonna I don't want to cut them down. Some of those guys are in a heck of a bad position. How overall, how is the ideology in the CPW, and do they have relationships with like the Wyoming's version of the CPW? I mean, where are we at on that?
They do. Now, there's these boots on the ground guys, these local guys that are part of these communities where these wolves were released. They're having to now repair some of these relationships with the ranchers and the landowners. They're trying. I mean, this is their career. This is what they
Sure.
wanted to do their whole lives. And they're in a really bad position because the leadership of CPW is not being transparent or accessible to them either. And some of the answers that they're giving to ranchers there are what CPW leadership is telling them, but it doesn't jive with what's actually happening.
Sure.
So the further you get up the food chain in CPW, the less transparent it is. And one thing that I can give you an example, during the CPW commission last week, Corey Gaines, who's from Sterling, he's an NJC like math professor, like engineering, super smart guy. He's not from ag. He's from Denver. He grew up in Denver, but he ended up at NJC in Sterling. And so he signed up for public comment about the wolves. And his comment was that it was not transparent. Okay. Keep in mind this transparent word. And he said, you didn't notify anyone. And I'm not expecting that all these people be invited to the party, but you could have at least notified the commissioners and the elected officials in Grand County and in Western Colorado that this was happening. And that didn't happen, yet you still had time to notify the 40 people with the hushed awe and the light applause who were there. And he mentioned that the governor was there and that the first gentleman was there. And he used the phrase that the first gentleman had a ringside seat. And Dallas May, who is the chair of the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission, hung up on him. Ended the conversation.
Oh my
By
God.
Felipe. Hung up on him about transparency. It blew my mind. And so Corey has visited with the legislative liaison for Department of Natural Resources. He has emailed Dan Gibbs, who is the executive director of the Department of Natural Resources. He has made all of these calls and emails to say, I would like a copy of the rules that I broke. And I want a copy of the rules that the commissioners are bound to, and I want an official recording of my comment. And all he's gotten back was, well, you were heard. And he said, I don't care if I was heard. That's not how the First Amendment works, friends.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Which takes us into the constitutionality of all of it, because to me, as a private landowner, I know this was done on state lands, which I don't know, but the sheriff does have complete dominion over his county, and so there's an issue there. But I want to tie it back to this is an example of the infiltration, and I'm talking about the Colorado Parks and Wildlife. This is an example of the infiltration of the ideology. We have local men and women who are raised in these communities and believe in their local communities, that their dream is, to be a wildlife biologist or whatever. And in the past, that source of work was directly connected to agriculture because they're both stewards, right? And now with this infiltration on the higher levels, which it's coming down, we know that it's coming down to the lower levels. That's a total example of how this ideology is spreading across the world. And it puts those employees in a horrible position with their own communities, and rural America is suffering now. I mean, you've been doing a podcast on mental health, and that is all a part of this. And it's very, very unfortunate that we put those people who have to put food on their table for these families, for their own families, in this kind of position. And it's just a really tough situation that we need to really be aware of and show how this ideology is moving, because one day we'll all have to say, hey, stop, no more. This can't happen like this.
CPW Commissioner Marie Haskett, who is the outdoors rep, like the hunters and outfitters rep, I
Mhm.
forget exactly what she's called, but she said, these relationships are being destroyed faster than you can fix them. And pretty soon, every private gate will be locked to CPW.
Yeah.
And it will seriously, CPW cannot manage wildlife in the state if they don't have access to these private lands, and gates are being locked every day.
Wow.
And there is a bill in committee right now, like literally this afternoon, that was introduced by 4 Western Slope legislators, Dylan Roberts, who represents Grand County as well. So it was him. I can't remember all of them. Perry Will, and 2 others whose name is escaping me yet again. But so they introduced this bill that would require these governor appointed positions like CPW Commission, like the Ag Commission, to have twice a year meetings, like listening sessions with the people that they are supposed to be representing, to hear from them and to
Wow.
face them and to have some accountability. And I am absolutely in support of this bill, so it probably won't pass. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm probably not. I don't know. It is a bipartisan bill, so maybe it will. But it would make these guys face the people that they're supposed to be representing. One of the guys on the CPW commission is part of the Southern Plains Land Trust, which is down in your country, Shad.
Oh my gosh, I was gonna bring that up in this conversation. Oh my gosh. Anyway, Jaden, where do you want to go?
You can run with that. Run with the land trust.
Well, this was another issue that I was thinking that kind of piggybacks off the wolf reintroduction. And you've mentioned it on your podcast a lot, Rachel, is that, we're going to have the Wolverine, consideration of the Wolverine reintroduction. We, the movement of prairie dogs. We've already experienced that thanks to the Southern Plains Land Trust back in 1999. When they tried to move that, the Southern Plains Land Trust bought the 1,280 acres in 99 in Baca County, and they wanted to move the prairie dogs down out of a cul-de-sac or whatever, that they were building in Longmont, and move them down there. And it caused a big, big, big stink, right? And so then that has only grown, the Southern Plains Land Trust has only grown for over the years, and great big, with lots of power and money from the outside. And it's an all, and I'm not saying this is wrong, I'm just saying the whole board of directors is all women. And they're none, I think there's one born and raised Colorado native in that, on the board of directors there. And it's just a movement that we know that has been in the works for a long time. And so I watch that as close as I can. But tell us how, if I'm just a rancher and that's all I am, you're so informed, Rachel, on these hot button issues like the Wolverine deal, the Wolverine drug. How do you as a publisher or investigator, how do you find out all of this that's coming down the pike? That's what people ask me all the time, and I'm like, I don't know. It just comes in my ear, and I remember it for some reason. I don't know why.
Just connecting all of those things. And a lot of this stuff comes from people that call me and say, did you know? Because with my work with the Fence Post, Tri-State Livestock News, and Western Ag Network, so I cover Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, and Montana. And you can't possibly keep track of all of the ag and all of the states by yourself. No. So I do have a lot of folks that'll text me or send me an article or say, did you know this? Did you look into this? I've got an email pulled up right now from somebody in the Lower Arkansas that's talking about the buy and drive from the Colorado Springs utilities.
Yeah.
And he gave me a couple of articles linked to me. So I'm digging into that. So it's not just me.
Yeah.
I'm not this. I really depend on lots of people who have an ear in that community, but I am lucky because I am part of the ag community, and my name's on the operating note too, so I have to, I pay attention to it. This is our livelihood.
You were born and raised in it, and you, like you said, you have a stake in the game, and so these are your people, right? and we have to protect our way of life, and that's what's really important.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what comes of that bill today. You know, Gary Skiba is one of the newest CPW commissioners that's been appointed by Governor Polis, and he is the Western Colorado rep. And he said in the commission meeting that he didn't think that rural Colorado had been mistreated or disrespected at all. He didn't know what the big deal was. And so if that passed, and Gary Skiba had to host listening sessions with the people that he's tasked to represent in Western Colorado,
Yeah.
that'll be good watching.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a little warm in that room, isn't it?
It might be a little toasty.
Might be a little toasty.
Well, I don't know. Where do you want to go now, Shad? Back to the wolves, or do you want to keep going?
Yeah, well, I think one thing that I want to talk to Rachel about is this potential reintroduction or protection of these other species. We obviously know that they're not on any kind of endangered species list, but they will make no doubt they will put them on there to try to protect them. And so where are we going with that, Rachel? What do you think?
Prairie dogs?
Well, I'm just saying prairie dogs, which has an effect on eastern Colorado. I know you said something that was really interesting to me, and you say if you think the wolf issue is not coming to you, you're wrong. It is coming to us, and it's coming maybe not in the wolves, but maybe with the mountain lion deal or with something like that. And I will tell you, Rachel, about 10 years ago, after they introduced the gray wolf back into New Mexico, I was headed to Texas, and I always go down from La Junta down to Kim and across to Campo, Colorado. And I was driving along, and I happened to just look to this right, and there was 5 what I thought really big coyotes attacking this cow who had just calved. And my dad was riding with me, and I said, "Dad, look at that." And he's like, "Those are wolves. Those are wolves." And I'm like, "What?" So we stopped, turned around, went back, and sure enough, they were 5 gray wolves attacking this cow along the highway between La Junta and Kim, Colorado. Those wolves had come up out of New Mexico. And so there is no boundary on this. I mean, we're in the middle of Northwest Crowley County, and we've had bear, mountain lion. We had a mountain lion kill a colt about 5 years ago. Couldn't find the colt. Finally found it buried in a ravine. Well, that was a mountain lion, and they ended up killing the mountain lion 60 miles from us over by Carville in 2 days. But those are things that have no boundaries. So where are we going with that? Is there any way that rural Colorado can fight back? I mean, really, is there?
It's a hard question, and it's one that I get asked a lot. These don't have boundaries. There's a lot of talk with the wolves, especially about if they go to Wyoming, those ranchers will shoot them. And there's lots of talk about they just have to survive, these ranchers. None of these boys want to go to federal prison in Colorado. So I don't think that the wolves are in danger from the ranchers. But if they go to Wyoming, they are in the predator zone and they can be shot. So we do have some states that have done a good job of laying that foundation for themselves. And I think we can certainly take a page from that book. As the prairie dog situation and the wolverine situation and all of this ballot box biology continues to happen, we just really have to stay engaged and stay on these folks on the CPW commission or on the ag commission or wherever. Because like with the prairie dog deal, the Department of Ag right now recognizes them as pests. I forget what the exact term is.
Yeah.
But it recognized them as like vermin pests. And so the governor wants to remove that and change it so that they're recognized as keystone species. Well, if that happens, then the state land board can no longer require prairie dog control on state land board lands. So it's all kind of connected there. So we need to lean on the Department of Ag to say, no, we don't want them designated as a keystone species. They are labeled correctly. And like right now, there's a big prairie dog town right there on the Boulder-Weld County line. It's like at a big intersection. And there was a gal that bought some land up by Crocent Red Angus. So like in the Briggsdale-ish area. And she wanted to make she wanted to bring all the prairie dogs over there. And she said, well, they won't leave my property because I'm going to put that plastic fencing stuff, you know, that they put around construction sites. Well, that's not going to stop them.
No.
And they can't read property lines or plat maps or anything like that. I've never seen a prairie dog that can read. So we just have to continue to lean on that. And, you know, the reason that they're not able to bring those is because if you're moving a species like that and doing a release, it's up to the county where you're releasing them.
Right.
And if
That's
that
right.
goes away, then we have big problems. So those counties have to stay strong, and those county sheriffs and the county commissioners
Yes.
need to be held accountable to hold people's feet to the fire, because they're like the last bastion of defense that we have. And we've
They
got to
really
make
are.
sure that we're standing behind them and holding them up and holding their feet to the fire.
And really, honestly, to go one step beyond that is holding them accountable. I mean, and
Absolutely.
I am not in any way degrading our public servants locally, but we do, it is our fiduciary duty to hold them accountable and say, hey, you're representing us. We have to do this. But one problem I see coming, Rachel, or I see that's here is even, you know, so you have the Colorado State Land Board, which is appointed by our governor or his people, and then that falls down, and you have I said state land board, didn't I? Not brand board. That's appointed, and then so all of these uh, movements in this ideology is controlled. You know, even the Department of Agriculture is controlled by one of his picks, and so they have control of thousands, tens of thousands of producers who have the opposite ideology or production standards that what they think they have, you know, and that is a problem in Colorado because it is really a delineation between rural and urban. And we have seen that there's almost no in between now in Colorado. And so I see that as a very long-term problem that I don't know what will fix. I don't know how that will fix it other than I have to do a better job. We all have to do a better job of bridging that gap of education. You know, I had a guy call me this morning about from Colorado about conservation easements, and he says, you know, we have a lot of liberal friends come to our ranch out of Denver, and they want to go on tours, and I take them on a tour. And he said this weekend a lady come and she's like, well, cattle are bad for the environment. And he says, well, why are they? And well, they drink 1,500 gallons. It takes 1,500 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of beef. And he says, where do you think that water goes? Does it just disappear? There's water in every fiber of that animal. There's, you know, and she's like, well, I never thought about it. So it is a communication issue. And we used to do a good job. You know, do you remember? I know you remember when the cow was more than a cow, when we put those pamphlets out in the schools. I loved that. I mean, I loved that when I was a kid. And it was so interesting to see how much, and we don't do that anymore. We're not educating. And well, you've got a pet partnership. And you can talk a little bit about that, but we've got to get into those highly urbanized schools and say, you know what, it really isn't how you're being taught.
Yeah.
And somebody's smart enough to figure that out, and it ain't me, but I'm willing to help.
Yeah, that education thing is hard because, you know, in agriculture for a long time, we've been told you need to tell your story, you need
Right.
to outreach. And it's hard to know what that looks like.
It is.
You can't stalk people at the grocery store at the meat counter and be like, I see you're looking at some ground beef. Would you like to learn? Would you like me to teach you? Because if somebody tells me that they're going to teach me something, I'm immediately on the fight because I'm fun that way.
Yeah.
But, you know, consumers don't want to be educated. They might want a relationship, but they don't want to be educated. One of the greatest things that I've had a chance to be a part of is my column in Colorado Politics in the Gazettes, because it's very consumer facing and it goes to the Front Range. And that has been amazing. And it's always cool to see how many people reach out and say, you know, my grandpa farmed, or my grandpa ranched, or he grew up on a dairy farm, or, you know, they're generations removed, as most Americans are, from
Sure.
production agriculture, but they're at least interested and they realize that it's connected to them in some way. And I think it's a mistake for us to get bogged down in that think a farmer, think a rancher type of movement, because I think we need consumers just as much as they need us.
Amen.
And I don't
That's
want
a good
people to
point.
feel like we want a pat on the back. Like this last week, it's been sub-zero. I didn't need a pat on the back. I needed to not have legislation bearing down on me that was gonna be a bigger problem than the frozen water.
And maybe a hot toddy.
Maybe a hot toddy.
No, I think you make a
Maybe.
good, I think you make a really good point there. And that's something to really think about, uh, if we can be more consumer driven, they do deserve, and I'm a proponent of MCOOL, and I just think that we do a disservice to our consumer when we don't give them the information and the choice, because ultimately um, they're not blaming skills, but ultimately we are the root of where all of our food comes from. Uh, it can be processed, it can go through other avenues to get to the consumer, but we are the ultimate root. And I think it's important that we really establish that with the consumer, and so they have trust in us. It is a trust issue, and we're all proud of our operations, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you're right, the pat on the back deal. Hey, we do this every day. It's not new. We don't need it to be in the news, but we do want it to be respected by the consumer, because ultimately the respect is trust, and trust is everything. So yeah, I mean, we
Yeah,
can
I
go every
definitely want
direction.
people to trust producers over legislators.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't want a legislator making decisions about how to do heart surgery. I would
that's
rather
right.
let surgeons make those decisions
But
because
I
I'm
do
not
want to
qualified.
trust. Yeah, but I do want to trust our legislators, and that's why I'm always, people look at me like I'm crazy, and I'm like, let's outlaw lobbying. I mean, there is no reason that our legislators should ever be paid for. And there's one up in the northern states that I say, before they even do anything with that individual, they're paid for. And I don't like that. I think that truth and honesty, we need to regain truth and honesty. And anyway, we're totally off subject, and that's my fault. But that's just how I feel.
How we roll. We're sorry.
It's where the road took us. That's okay. Well, okay,
You're just
what
getting
else?
a glimpse into me and Shad's conversations again
I
here.
love it. I love it. This is how our conversations go, Shannon and I too. So I'm glad to know I'm not the only one.
It appears that you're the common denominator here, Sullivan.
Yeah, I think it's you.
Stirring that pot.
Well, okay, what next, Shad? What do you want to cover? More on wolves,
Well,
or what road do you want to take?
I don't, I mean, whatever you want to do, it's a great conversation, and it does revolve around wolf reintroduction. And I don't know, you've got
I
some
have
good
something.
questions here.
I have something. So I do want
Yeah.
to talk about the fact of, so what's different between Colorado and some of these other states with the wolves they cannot shoot the wolf unless it is in self-defense, like personal self-defense, correct?
So if they're being attacked like a human is being attacked, you could. And they say if you catch them in the act of attacking, harassing, biting your livestock, but you have to have a permit. So if you're just caught in the heat of the attack and you don't already have a permit, that, by the way, CPW is probably not going to give you,
Yeah.
then you can't.
They'll hang
And
up on you.
wolves eat stuff in the middle of the night, and it's illegal in Colorado to use thermal imaging, night vision, stuff like that. So if you shot a wolf without a permit in the dark using things like thermal imaging, then you'd be a felon.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, you can, but you can't.
Yeah, and I just think that's ridiculous because I mean, essentially they're taking away your defense of your way of life, how your literal property rights, like we talk about all the time of they literally came in, they were like, nope, you can't defend, that cow that's your salary, your way of life. You can't defend that. And that's just ridiculous. So then I guess I also want to bring up, So I know it's also common because I mean we have a lot of members in Montana and Washington that have, I mean, just horror stories from the wolves of it's common of they don't just outright kill them all the time. You know, they cause a lot of damage and just, you know, hurt to the animal. They don't necessarily kill them. And so like I just where are the animal rights activists on that? Where are they on the deaths of these calves and these lambs and these dogs, or just the stress of reintroducing wolves from Oregon to Colorado, period? Like, where are they on that?
You're watching the hair blow in the wind
Yeah,
as
they're
they
distracted.
majestically gallop into the forest. I don't know where they are. I wouldn't think that, you know, when they kill sheep or cows and just eat their vulvas out and leave them there with their guts hanging out,
It's
or kill
terrible.
them while they're down trying to have a calf. That's not terribly humane, but they always say, well, they're predators. That's what they do. Well, yeah, they are.
Yeah,
Well, and
it's
it goes it all ties into the anti-animal ideology. And, you know, we have extreme animal rights organizations all across the nation, including the Humane Society of the United States, whose CEO said, my ultimate goal is to end animal ownership. And so that's what we're seeing, is that anti-animal ideology. And how do you do that? Well, you open the floodgates. I mean, we're seeing it in our own lives, and you open the floodgates to those things that will end ultimate production on your private land, because we know that private property is the foundation of freedom, and that's what they don't want you to have. And they don't like the productivity of the anti-meat establishment doesn't like that kind of productivity. So they're going to do whatever they can, and they're going to infiltrate any group they can to implement their ideology across America and the world. And it's spreading fast, but consumers are waking up, people are waking up, and they're saying, hey, we're not sure if this is really good for our local community. We're not sure if this is good for America and for our freedom. And so I see it on both sides. It's incredibly dangerous, and at the same time, we see patriots rising up and saying, hey, no more. But anyway, our goal is to produce the most wholesome and you know, most wonderful beef on earth, which we do right here in America, and get it to our consumer. And so that's where we need to focus on keeping going while we fight these fights to the side, which, you know, Rachel, you do a fantastic job, and I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us. Thank you so much.
Of course, thanks for having me. You know, you reminded me of something else when you said infiltration and private property rights. It made me think of Direct Action Everywhere. And they're a perfect example of how we can keep our local judges, holding them accountable. There was a case in Utah, this Direct Action Everywhere. Sometimes you see it as DXE, like capital
Okay.
D, small x, capital E. They're actually we're based out of Colorado, oddly enough, Boulder. But they do the open rescues, which is code for breaking and entering and stealing livestock. You know, they rescue baby pigs and whatnot, and they're coming onto private property to do so. And of course, that's when we're talking pigs or turkeys or whatever, we're talking about a huge bio risk. But in Utah, that went to trial, and they were found not guilty
Wow.
of trespassing, which is bananas, because that's absolutely trespassing. That's absolutely theft. And boy, if you're not holding that judge accountable,
That's
and that's where you're from, you
really
need to start
excellent
doing
point.
that,
Yeah.
because it's a question of private property rights, and
Yeah.
that was such a glaring error. And I don't think that most people agree with the radical extremists like that. Like, I don't think most people would be like, yes, we should break into that farm and
No, you're
rescue
right.
piglets,
Right.
and then post the video all over social media and YouTube. We should do
Well,
that. I don't think most people want to do that. I think they're the noisy minority, but they
they
get a lot
are.
of head.
They are, and they're the noisy minority, but they also have a large funding mechanism behind them. And then you wonder, you know, a judge like that, you wonder, well, does that funding mechanism make it downhill to that person? Because that defies all logic. It defies all common sense in a capitalistic society. So we do have to hold those judges accountable, very much so. I know we lost our judge in Crowley County, And the governor appointed another judge for Crowley County that doesn't even live in the county and never has. And I'm like, what? What's going? So yeah, it's a big deal everywhere. It's just everything's so interwoven and combined, and we really have to be on top of it as citizens.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just a wolf. It's just opening the
Yeah,
doors.
yeah,
This
the wolf deal is just
dumpster fire.
Yeah, a wolf deal was just testing the waters.
It
Yeah.
sure is. I totally agree. Totally agree. Well, give us an update on Don Gittleson. I mean, I've talked to him one time. I don't know the man. I've never met him face to face. Tell us how he is right now. We know that he's gone through immortal hell.
He has. So right now, I haven't heard anything else in the last week or so, but he's been doctoring a heifer that was taken down by wolves
Right.
and stifled her, chasing her, and she's got some pretty bad wounds. He said he can put his hand in the tears on the back legs. So he's trying to keep, fluid out of her belly, fluid out of her legs, and keep the swelling down so that he could do something with her. He's not going to be able to retain her as a replacement heifer. And, all CPW can say as well, if she was killed, we would reimburse you up to $15,000. Okay, well, that doesn't pay for the drop in pregnancies. It doesn't pay for lighter weaning weights. It doesn't pay for death loss. It doesn't pay for the calves that we never find when we come down in the fall, if you're 20 calves short, which he always is.
Wow.
So, he's been very much like the petri dish at the middle of the target here. And I think that at some point CPW is going to have to use that 10J rule, but I'm afraid that when they do use that to get rid of some of those problem wolves, that the activists and the radicals will go after the 10J rule, and then we won't have anything to stand on. So I don't know if having it and not using it is worse than it being taken away. I don't know what the answer is there.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that he's going to have more attacks in the future, and they're probably going to be those same two wolves. CPW did mention that they're trying to put together, an online tool to kind of see some location on the collared wolves for ranchers. I don't know what that looks like. If they're just going to be like, they're in Grand County. Oh, thanks. That's very helpful.
Right.
Grand County is fairly large. So if they're just going to say they're in Grand County, that's not helpful at all to any rancher in Grand County. But if they're saying that they're in Southeast Grand County, maybe that's a little bit more helpful. But I'm thinking, like, in the county where I live in northeastern Colorado, if you just said they're in Northeast Morgan County,
right.
well, that's a lot of ground.
Yeah.
And I don't expect them to say they're on Don Gittleson's place or whatever, but a little help would be nice. And I realize they keep saying that they want to protect the wolves and they want to protect the CPW staff. And like I said, these boys don't want to go to federal prison.
Well, and there is no amount of technology that is going to reduce the stress that these wolves have caused inside a herd, much less talking about an individual rancher's emotional stress. I mean, when I've read a lot what Don has said, and I've heard him talk on your show, and you talk about him a lot, and I don't think he gets any sleep. I mean, I just think he is totally out there, and what a lonely environment the man is in, even if he has family and community support, but because ultimately none of that makes the mortgage payment at the end of the day. And so it doesn't matter if there is a cost, no matter any protection CPW puts in, the state puts in, your community puts in, there is a cost to Don Gittleson and his life. And it's stress. And that needs to be an issue that is brought up, because these people have value. They're not nobodies. They have value. So I don't know. We just go down different paths every time I get to blabbing my mouth, and I apologize.
Now, Don, he goes out to his pickup around 7 o'clock at night. And if nothing's going on, he goes back in, comes back out at 11. And he doesn't go back in until 7 o'clock in the morning.
Amazing.
He takes a little cat nap. He might sleep in the feed pickup or something while he's waiting for water to fill. That's not a quality of life.
No, not
And
at all.
all of these non-lethal methods that CPW and now Colorado Department of Agriculture are pushing, you have to know that the wolves are in that vicinity to put them up, because they only work for a certain amount of time. You can't string miles of flattery
Right.
if you don't know that they're in the area. And if you do, then they'll be used to it by the time you need it. And
Yeah.
if you don't use the non-lethal methods, then you're not eligible for the same compensation, but you're not going to tell us where they are. It's just a vicious cycle.
It is a vicious cycle. And on top of that, we're in Grand County, Colorado, west of the Continental Divide. It's not like you're in Southeast Colorado and Crowley County where you could see 40 miles. I mean, the lay of the land is so different and the forage is so different, trees and everything. So it's just a guessing game, a crapshoot of how do you prepare and where are they at? And, it's almost like, to me, if I was in his shoes, I'd be paranoid all the time because I'm trying to protect my way of life and how I put food on the table. So my hat goes off to him, and I hope you can tell him that for us, because we wanted to have him on, and then I was like, let's just do Rachel today and get her information, because she is so full of knowledge.
I do have one more question. Sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
No, I was just being a smart aleck. Sorry.
Oh, you're good.
I'm full of lots of things.
No way.
So with how CPW is dealing with all this stuff, is that common in the other states that have reintroduced the wolves of, Montana, Washington, Oregon? How are their parks and wildlife people handling it for their ranchers, I guess? Do you know?
I can't speak to those states as well as I can to Colorado, but I can tell you that there are different laws in those states, in some of those states, that makes a big difference. And I can also tell you that they don't have the pressure of the radical environmental groups that we do, especially in the governor's mansion.
Gotcha.
Good point.
Hey, Shad, what else? Anything else?
No, I think like I said, Rachel, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us, and I'm excited. Tell us about your meet-in day in Sterling, Colorado. When is it?
Sure, it's March 16th in Sterling at the Logan County Fairgrounds. You can't miss it. It's huge. They have a big auction. They've raised almost $500,000 for local charities,
Yeah,
including some that help the children of fallen veterans. It's a program that they pay for sports or music or whatever extracurricular activities those kids want to do, paid for.
that is
And
so
so
fantastic.
Yeah.
So, Rachel, tell us a little bit. How did the meet-in days in Colorado come to be? Tell us about that.
So several years ago, the governor bought Impossible Whoppers for the entire Department of Ag and encouraged them to think about how the Department of Ag can kind of pivot and take advantage of the plant-based movement. Of course, we don't grow coconut fiber or soybeans or anything here. So that was quite a slap to ranchers who are part of the $40 billion ag industry here in Colorado, to be told, see how you can pivot to do better. So that started it. And then he signed, it's just one of those stupid petitions that goes out, and, you can make a proclamation of meet-in day or meet-out day or official, German Shepherd Day. It's just the stupid petitions that go, or the proclamations that go around. But he signed one just right after that. And there were lots of events after he did that, like the Better with Beef campaign. And he came to Denver near the stock show and had some beef and visited with us and whatnot. But then he signed this Meat Out Day proclamation, which was pretty tone deaf on his part. But in turn, the ag community came up with these meet-in days. They're all over the place. There's not as many as there were at first, but the ones that are still going are huge, just like the one in Crowley County, which is March 30th at Big Blue in Ordway.
Right.
And they have guest speakers. They have silent auctions to raise money for local FFA chapters, 4-H clubs, veteran groups, you name it, but it's all local. And it's been, I would say there's probably been close to $1 million raised across the
Oh,
state
yeah.
by these
Yeah.
guys easily. But they come together and they feed people beef and hand out recipes and have public speakers and auctions to raise money and, you know, you name it, cornhole tournaments, all kinds of stuff, just to have a chance to feed their neighbors.
That's right.
So
And
that's what it came into.
yeah, and you know, in Crowley, and I know it's this way across the state in Crowley County, it was a way that we could showcase and celebrate not only our number one ag industry, but we could promote that product to our local consumer and let them for no cost. And in turn, they have, for Crowley County, and obviously for you guys too, way more for you guys because you're a bigger population. But we've been able to put scholarship to money together, two collegiate scholarships every year. And so that's exciting for a little county. And we got, last year we had over 300 people come, and we've got one exciting speaker coming to talk about the animal rights movement this year. And so we're excited, and it's just a good community event. And that's what I love about rural Colorado, and how we can really get things going, because ultimately the Meat Out Day was a sister to Meatless Mondays, which was promoted by the World Wildlife Fund years and years ago, and kind of found its way into our school system. So there has been a lot of repair on that, thanks to rural Colorado. And so I'm proud to say that. So if we're ready to wrap it up, I have one more question. Are we, Jaden, do you have what you need?
I think so. I think we're good.
Okay. Well, I know for a fact that Rachel Gabel is a prolific writer, leader, community leader. She's all about the community. I love that. She's got these little kids that know how to show, and they produce a lot of beef. So Rachel, what is your favorite cut of beef, and how do you like it prepared?
So this is a toss-up. I really like a rib steak, a ribeye, medium rare, no more cooked. Almost on the verge of a good vet could still save this animal. But I also just like a burger. Like, I think a lot of the world's problems can be solved with a cheeseburger.
Wow.
Real. I agree. Well,
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah, that was great. Okay, well, any last comments before we stop recording?
No, you can sure find me on, I'm hard to miss, but through the Fence Post and Western Ag Network, and then of course through the Pro Ag podcast. And you can follow along on Rachel Writes, Rachel Gabel on Facebook, and you can at least come for the cow bios, which is my free therapy.
I was looking at
My
those.
daily-
They're very
My
entertaining.
daily ridiculous post.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for being a strong voice on this issue and for being such a strong voice in agriculture. We appreciate you taking the time to share your insights with us. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave us a review, and stay updated and engaged in the conversation by giving us a follow at RCAP USA on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. RCAP USA is set apart from all other national cattle associations because we rely solely on membership dues and donations to carry out our mission to ensure the continued profitability and independence of United States cattle and sheep producers. We exist only because of the support from our members. We ask you to help support RCAP USA and become a member today. To do that, go ahead and call 406-252-2516 or go to r-capusa.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. We'll see you next time on the RCAP USA Roundup.